Welcome to Grappling with the Great, a forum for promoting an ethical mindset and ethical decision-making to help us more clearly see both sides of a complex issue and better navigate the moral challenges of everyday life. I'm Yonason Goldson, and with me today is Sean Flaherty, who is CEO of Advanced Leadership Concepts, serving executive teams by unlocking the science of leadership with powerful tools that transform and inspire. Sara Kalmeta, also known as Sara the Pivoter, is a speaker, author, and relentless truth seeker. She is founder of Pivot Point International, a high-performance consulting company. And Bronson Taylor is a student at Oregon State University, majoring in education with a math focus, and possibly the first Gen Z guest on this program. So thank you, Bronson, for being with us. Here is our topic today. 6 years ago, Starbucks introduced a new model, mobile-only pickup stores, targeting Gen Z's taste for frictionless experience. Last week, CEO Brian Nicole declared the experiment a failure, announcing that all these stores would be shuttered or converted by the end of next year. So what happened? Did Starbucks do market research? Was their study flawed? Has Gen Z changed their preferences in the last half-decade? Or is it simply impractical to generalize the preferences of an entire generation? Even had the research been correct, since Starbucks built its empire on the warmth and human connection of a corner coffee house, were they destined to fail by attempting to change who they are? On the one hand, businesses that don't adapt can quickly fail, like Blockbuster and Eastman Kodak. On the other hand, trying to adapt to every shifting trend may well lead to inauthenticity and mediocrity. Is this the symptom of a culture in which we try to be everything to everyone? Is it a reflection of the erosion of core values that used to be universal? How can we balance agility with brand integrity? And what are the risks of straying too far in either direction? Sean, will you start us off?
Yeah, so I'm awful close to my experience here. I worked for almost 2 years for Eastman Kodak back in the late 90s, which was their heyday. It was the peak of their existence. And we all know what happened to Eastman Kodak. It's a very sad story about a behemoth, highly profitable, too profitable organization that essentially went bankrupt almost overnight because of a changing demographic and a change, in market structure, largely empowered by technology, but it's technology that they invented themselves. So not understanding what the market wanted, what the market needed, and being stuck. Some argue that they were stuck in a very old mindset and were being run by a very older crew of people who were so mired in their success that they couldn't see, what was coming and make changes. And I've heard many people argue that it's a symptom of this sort of demographic bias that you're mentioning, and not having enough diversity of perspective. So that's one side of the equation here is you need to understand your customers. Charlie Munger, I think, said, I know he said this because I've seen it published many, many places, that those who know their customers best always win. They're the ones that win their markets. And I believe that. So I think if you have a product or a service that's specifically targeted to a specific demographic, it's your job to know that customer well and know how to service them and solve their problems and connect with them and turn them into advocates. And if you don't, you're not gonna find much success in there. And I think that's what Starbucks stumbled against in your opening statement, right? Like they thought that there's this demographic thing that we can just focus on this, and this is going to help us win in this market, without really understanding all the dynamics of the human experience in that context.
And then there's an unethical underpinning here that any business and its leaders have a responsibility not only to their customers, but to their employees and their shareholders and their stakeholders. And if I don't run my company in a responsible way, then I'm endangering the livelihoods and the financial welfare of the people who are part of my organization. And I'm simply not serving the people that I'm there to serve.
Yeah, without a doubt. And this, this is I know Sarah's material quite well and her history and her background, and this is her domain, like the domain of the pivot. So I'd love your thoughts, Sarah, on the whole Kodak debacle. What you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, there's sometimes things that we think are a great idea. We do the research, we set the plan, and in a perfect world, in a vacuum, that plan goes flawlessly and everything works out exactly as you expected. And that is not how the world works. There's a lot of factors that we later, when we reflect, see that we made assumptions. We studied maybe one target market in a particular location. We did not account for the culture in different cities and different countries. And then we just apply a blanket rule. And in order to stretch, we do need to push the boundaries, right? We can't always do status quo because growth won't happen. However, if the stretch is too great, that's often where the failure point comes in because it's out of reach. Maybe we're not competent, we don't have the skill set to make those things happen, or we did it too quickly and we missed some of the crucial steps that would have allowed us to uncover, uh, the pitfalls that we're encountering. A lot of people like to think that the line of success is from, bottom going straight up, and it's not. There's many pitfalls, there's many roundabouts sometimes. If anyone's ever driven in Paris and that mini roundabout, like I had a friend get stuck for 2 hours trying to get out, and if you're not aggressive enough, you will never leave the roundabout. But that's the reality of the paths we have in life too. So from a business perspective, we really need to check in consistently, not just set a plan and go heads down and go after it. We need to make sure we're listening to what are the results we're getting from those actions so that we can make the micro adjustments before we get to a point where we go, oh, well, that was 2 years of waste and unsuccessful attempts.
There's so many cautionary tales of companies that waited too long and missed the boat, or jumped too fast and self-destructed. And if there's no real rule of thumb, so what's your counsel, sir? Is there a way to sum it up, or is it just sort of that messy sit and wait and watch and look and listen and try to figure it out?
I'm going to give you a very typical MBA answer. It depends.
There we go.
It's called the messy middle for a reason. And it really does take building your muscle of awareness. And there are different skill sets, right? And there's people to manage a process. You need people to lead a team through that change. And those are two very different skill sets. So making sure that you're paying attention and listening is going to be one of the most crucial things you can do. I like to use an analogy of hand flying an airplane, or even driving a car. I'll use that because more people drive a car than flying an airplane. But if you're driving on the road and there's something in front of you and you just need to slightly move over or even just change lanes, you do that pretty gently. You're not like, oh, I need to quickly turn and abruptly go this way. And yet that's how we treat change for some reason because we're very reactionary. So the more we can give ourselves tools to regulate the emotional experience, understand that it's happening, then the easier that messy middle becomes to process and navigate. And then you have, the blinders come off, your peripheral vision expands, and you can make more clear decisions.
Yeah, I like the analogy of driving, because when we're making minor course corrections, we do it gently, as you say. When something really unexpected pops up, we have to be able to respond in the moment. So, again, there's no rule of thumb. How do you respond to situations? You simply develop the mindset, the awareness, and the skills to be able to do that. So I like that. I'm just looking at the screen, and I didn't query anybody here on their age. But I'm wondering if maybe we may represent the four generations here, Boomer, Gen X, millennial and Gen Z, which is an interesting constellation. Um, Bronson, do you have a perspective here? I mean, maybe, I know that I'm officially a baby boomer, although I'm in that sort of twilight between boomer and Gen X. But I think it's I just feel it's silly to try to categorize myself as a member of a stereotypic avatar of my generation. Um, you're on the other end of the spectrum, as it were. Um, what do you say about the stereotypes that might feed into the specifics of this Starbucks situation?
The stereotypes, I'm not really sure because I myself have gone to Starbucks maybe twice in my life, which is, which they're probably not the demographic I'm aiming for anyway. But with the mobile order, they probably were because they're going after Gen Z because, like you said, of the frictionless kind of ordering process. But I think where they really miss the mark is the overgeneralization of Gen Z and also how Gen Z reacts to a lot of where they stand with some of their business practices.
Hmm.
Like Starbucks has been kind of known for being extremely anti-union. And so Gen Z kind of the new age is coming into the workforce. They're not really taking a stand for how employers have been treating them in the past. And so with all this anti-union practices that Starbucks has been practicing, Gen Z is going to see that and think, I maybe we shouldn't support Starbucks. It's Starbucks has appeared on some boycott lists because of that and for other reasons. And also, much like other companies, they are very performative in what they practice, such as during certain social events, like during the Black Lives Matter movement. Initially, they banned their employees from wearing pins in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. However, after public backlash, they later rescinded that and even made merch in support of Black Lives Matter. So realistically, to me, it seems Starbucks doesn't really care about Gen Z or anybody, just their profits. And I think a lot of Gen Z just kind of sees through that, and it's why this particular model is failing.
That's Sarah. That goes with that reactionary approach that you were talking about, and it does project that idea that we don't have any core values. We're simply trying to do what's popular and what's going to put us in line with the social fads or trends of the moment.
Hmm. So I find it interesting that the Starbucks, this is directed towards Bronson and his feedback on your generation's perspective, um, that Starbucks chose a path of convenience for that demographic versus really thinking about what the demographic cares about when they're trying to choose a brand and trying to connect with the people. I think that was so. Am I accurate to say, Bronson, that that's the core mistake they made, was really not even thinking about the concerns of the generation and jumping to a conclusion about convenience being the mobile ordering and ease of use being the key factor? Is that what you're trying to say?
That is what I'm trying to say, yes. And also something else I want to bring up is like a lot of the actual coffee houses, not just the mobile order places, take mobile orders. Like you
They
can
all do.
order online. Yeah, you can order online at the coffee house and go in and pick it up, which kind of goes against the coffee house kind of atmosphere that Starbucks has been trying to build, which is probably why those mobile houses are failing as well. and they're trying to build something out of nothing, really, because they're known for their atmosphere of a coffee house. There are other coffee places that have mobile only. Those are the atmospheres that they have built. Starbucks doesn't need to move away from that just yet because people aren't moving on from coffee houses either.
Interesting.
It's really kind of mind-boggling. If that's, I mean, is it possible that a company like Starbucks would make a major shift like this without a tremendous amount of market research? I mean, it sounds kind of like the new Coke.
I mean,
Yeah, and again, oh, sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
I was gonna say, yeah, I feel like they would have done market research, and maybe they don't have enough Gen Z in their team leading that research or connecting the dots. There's very often silos within organizations, so they're independently going after different tasks and not coming together to coordinate their information sources or make sure that it's sound checked, if you will. And I've heard many times that, and I know from, my siblings who are Gen Z, the value system of the organization really matters. Younger millennials and Gen Z are also looking at airline apps, and are you offsetting your emissions? I will fly this airline if they're not. There's a lot of things that the millennial generations and older never thought about, and it was not part of the decision-making process. And so it's a learning curve to, obviously, a business exists to make profit. And if that's and to add value to whatever service or population it's serving. There's a whole new nuance and component that needs to be considered. There's a lot of people, even in the millennial generation, as they're moving away. I think the millennials, if we want to use a label and a category, is a work hard, people-pleasing generation. Like, I'm going to work really hard. I'm going to make you really happy, and I'll stress myself out on the process. But they're focusing on work-life balance. That's one of their core focus things. It was never a conversation of, well, I don't agree with the values. Now it very much is. And so you'll start to see that get carried, right? And not just at the crossover of the younger millennials and the older Gen Z. That'll just to like an ink dot that bleeds out, or a ripple effect. It'll to impact everybody. And then in 10 years, that will be the core narrative of the workplace.
Yeah, and then we've talked about this in the program before, the choice of not doing business with companies that take positions that are contrary to one's own core values. And so is this sort of a seepage from core values into any values. We can actually cut ourselves off from almost any organization or any company. Somebody said something, somebody did something. And look at this whole what's the name? Sydney episode going on right now. Some sound in the background.
I think it's here. Yeah, so I'll mute.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's. Are people looking for reasons to have complaints or objections? Are we just more sensitive than we used to be? Is it coming from a good place of conscience, and is an overreaction? What do you make about this particular trend?
I think it's always been there. Frankly, I think it's always been there. We've always wanted to, live by our values and attach ourselves to companies that believe the same things we believed. It's just we haven't had as much access, and the internet's changed that, and mobile technology's changed that, and ChatGPT is changing that at scale. The technology is allowing us to have so much access to information and belief systems that we never had access to before. So If you think about it, it's a pretty profound ability that these younger generations have that we didn't even grow up with. You know, so they have this ability to say, I'm not going to buy from that store because they don't believe what I believe. We didn't have that option when we were kids. You either got it or you didn't get it. It's like it's there. You can buy it or you can't. It's like what store could you walk to and buy something from? We didn't have all of that. So generationally, it's kind of brilliant. They have access to be able to drive this values driven discussion that wasn't even available to the world before, which I think empowers them in a profound way. And it could be taken advantage of, or it could be used to make the world, a better place. And both of those things are going to happen, you know? So.
Bronson, do you think that you find that goes into your decision making or those of your peers?
Sorry.
Do you think that, do you feel that your decision making or the choices of your peers is governed in the way that Sean's described? This sensitivity to sort of corporate behavior, corporate values?
Yeah, I'd say so. Because it extends to not just Starbucks. There are multiple boycott lists for many different reasons, and you can kind of just pick and choose or use all of them. Like, I'm gonna choose to boycott these places because they don't align with my values. And it's I think it's kind of great that we have access to that now.
Where do you find these lists?
Uh, I just kind of was Googling for 2 hours yesterday. There's one in particular. I think there was a boycott in July for Home Depot, Starbucks, and another one by by some sort of union backed, not union backed, but it was a union company, and it was these three stores in particular were practicing major anti-union practices such as firing or shutting down stores that voted to unionize. And you can just kind of Google boycott lists for this month and you'll get them.
Does that sort of lead us into the same kind of question of who's making the lists?
Who's taking advantage of
All
this
right.
this new availability of information? Like, there's always going to be someone taking advantage of it for all sorts of purposes, positive and negative purposes, right?
Sure. And then, as we all know, you can go on Fox News and you can go on MSNBC, and you feel like they're describing two completely different realities, all very passionately and appearing very sincere in what they're saying. So, we're once again faced with this challenge of getting a broad view, getting an honest representation, so that we can make we want to make we want to make correct decisions, we want to make good choices, and yet we can feel hampered in our ability to simply get the facts and get the information we need to make those choices.
I'm curious what prompted Starbucks to believe they needed to go after a mobile only store. To Bronson's point, you can already do mobile service now. At the airport, you can do it. And people who travel a lot, that's what they do. They'll order it so that as they go through security, it's, ready instead of waiting in a queue, because it doesn't matter if you're in the line or order at the same time, right? You still have the same wait time. So what was it that caused them to want to make that pivot? And why did they go after that, right? It was they started because it was the third place that you went to. It wasn't your home, it wasn't your office, but it was this space that you wanted to be in, that you could read a book or be creative or connect with people. And you spent time there. And that's why traditionally Starbucks are, very inviting places to be in. And you don't want to leave. Whereas if you go to, fast food, like McDonald's, red and yellow are colors that are aggravating. So it actually makes you want to leave faster And that's on purpose so that you go in and out very quickly. So what was it that made Starbucks think, we need to now make mobile stores and move away from our core offering?
I've been thinking about this a little bit. I think it was mostly an experiment to see kind of what they could get away with because when with those mobile only, it kind of eliminates jobs as well. Like it eliminates the cashier position. You don't have to talk to anybody as much. Now there isn't as many people working, and as a company, you're probably going to want to make as much profit as possible. So if they can kind of cut employees, then they can make a larger profit. But that's just speculation on my part.
I do think there's, at least in my experience, some speculation like that occurs naturally. There's in the younger generations, there's this natural sort of, I don't know if it's natural, but it's definitely a pervasive, what's the word I'm looking for? They suspect that capitalism is a bad thing. That everybody's just looking out for how can they make more money, and I don't know that that's always true. And I don't know much about Starbucks leadership, but I will tell you that from my demographics perspective, Starbucks helped me tremendously start my business. If you, I don't, you probably can't even imagine this, Bronson, but when the internet first came out, they were one of the first companies in the country. I think they might have been the first, like big brand, to say we're going to give free access to everybody in our lobbies, free access, and people were like, "What?" And that allowed me to avoid having an office expense for many, many years before I finally, we were having meetings in Starbucks all over my city, and then, we supported them. So I still support them to this day because of that connection. But I do believe, and I also am a big fan of, if you've read Howard Schultz's book or anything by him, I've read many, many books about him and by him. He's the founder of what we know of as Starbucks today. He had a fundamental belief that customers and relationships come first. They come first. But I don't know if they've deviated from that. And I think this whole mobile experience I think it's a flop because they've deviated from that belief system. Like, oh, we can avoid this customer experience and just make money. So I do believe that Bronson's onto something with that, with this latest generation of Starbucks leadership. But that's just speculation. Because if you read about Schultz and his belief systems in the early days, he said in one interview, if you give me $1 to spend on marketing, I'll spend it on training my baristas, and I'll invest in them so that they have a better experience, so that they understand the customers, and I'll pay them a little more, and they'll produce a better experience for the customer. And those are fundamental belief systems that I have. Does that make sense? So I'm somewhat aligned with you. I think it was an experiment, and I think it failed because it was not aligned with what I believe Starbucks values used to be or should be and are stated as. So,
And I think that you can find other examples of this. I was thinking about Southwest Airlines.
Mm.
I've been flying them for years because here in St. Louis, you're limited in your options. But for years, for decades, they were the only U.S. carrier to have never had an unprofitable quarter. And in the last couple of years, they seem to be flailing. And they're now changing their boarding policies. They're changing their pricing. They're really overturning the whole sort of customer culture that they had cultivated, which is generally a sign of desperation. Now, I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but I have heard speculation that they may be in serious trouble. And then it becomes a sort of chicken and egg question. Are they changing policies because something's wrong, or are they creating problems by changing their policies? And I think it goes very much to your point, Sean, that when you establish a certain culture, if you feel the need to change something or fix something, any changes need to be consistent with that core culture or you're simply going to make things worse. I have a comment from Sadie in the comments. She asks, is there any other coffee brand which can be compared to Starbucks in terms of policies? Anybody have any experience in that area?
I don't. I'm of two camps. When I'm in small towns or traveling, I like to support the local coffee shops as much as possible. And when I'm on the road and doing my thing and I'm in a fast-paced environment, I'm still loyal to Starbucks just because of, like I said, how they supported me in the beginning of my corporate experience. So,
Well,
and
I really like that point that and it really speaks to brand loyalty.
mhm,
That you feel that you benefited from Starbucks
sure,
and you want to honor that. And
there's there's something important about respecting the history that you have.
yeah, and I
Uh,
think it's admirable, and I think it's something that we don't see enough of
mm,
in our culture today. Um, I know that I'm not a coffee drinker, and I generally find that most of these places are charging more than I want to pay. But if I take a meeting in Starbucks or any other coffee house, I always make a point of buying something
of course,
because I'm I'm benefiting, even if I'm just paying for the chair and the table and a place to have a meeting. I want to, I don't want to take advantage of them having an open door policy without giving them some of my business.
yeah. Hmm. I've heard, you can back me up on this one, Bronson, but I heard a lot of the younger generation are now starting to boycott things like Amazon in general, for all kinds of reasons. Some of them
Yep.
in related to how they treat their employees, some of them related to other things. But do you think it's, just out of curiosity, do you think it's more of a lash out towards big corporations and monopoly sort of things, or do you think it's really values based?
Both. I think I think that it the main reason is values. They don't align, but then also people like to kind of stick it to the man, for lack of a better term,
Yeah,
and just being able and just trying to have the power to kind of take away some of the profits from big monopolies like Amazon. Yeah, it feels kind of good.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting point. That's something a student of history. One of my heroes is Teddy Roosevelt, and he was known as the trust buster. He went in and broke up the monopolies, and it seems as if the pendulum has been swinging back to mergers and bigger businesses. As you said, Sean, when you go to a small town, you want to give local businesses your business. Um, I feel the same way in locally. I'd
mhm,
rather give my business to a small shop than to a big box store. And when I can only get it from the big box store, I'll go there. But if I have smaller options, I'd rather patronize them. And it's
yeah,
the same thing with the online. I mean, Amazon is so convenient and so easy and so competitive that it really takes an act of will to not just use that as my default.
yeah, yeah.
Bronson,
Go ahead, Sarah. Sorry.
Bronson, would you say that you have that same feeling, that maybe you and your peers would prefer to go to local restaurants, coffee houses, places?
100%. Yeah. I I don't like to go to big corporate places just because they feel fake all of the time. And so if I can just kind of keep my money away from them, it feels better.
Yeah, interesting. So, because what I wanted to highlight there is that there's often a pendulum swing. There's this expansion and then contraction that occurs. And so it'll be avoid big business. And then, oh, let's combine forces and do it together. And then now it's monopoly. Like, oh, avoid big business. And it kind of swings. Because I would say that there's a lot of the millennial generation that, I mean, I remember when I was growing up, everybody loved going to the chain restaurants and all these things. I personally abhor them. I think it's awful. And the food is terrible. And the experience is very, very fake, to your point, Bronson. Um, but everybody loved those things for a period of time and then it shifted. And so I think that's part of this natural human experience because whatever is the popular thing or the man is kind of pushing, the newer generation coming in kind of goes against that. So I wonder if that's part of what's happening as well.
I have a question for Bronson, if I
One
may.
second, Sean, before you do, in the comments, Eduardo, he likes Bronson's suggestion of sticking it to the man. But, and sort of in the context of what you just said, Sara, that it seems maybe that, the man today is not the government or the police, but the gazillionaire.
The behemoth companies with
Yeah,
very concentrated.
Bezos and Musk and Gates and those
Yeah.
people that
The so-called ruling class. Yeah.
Hmm.
go ahead, Sean.
I'm curious, Bronson, are there any brands that are rather large that you actually do like and love?
Taco Bell.
Aha! All
Yeah.
right. So there is a
Yeah.
little gray area there for you.
Yeah. 100%. That's kind of really the only one that I will go to consistently. Uh, the current Starbucks CEO actually used to be a CEO at Taco Bell. I didn't know that until I was kind of doing some research for this podcast, which
Hmm.
kind of throws me off of Taco Bell now, unfortunately, because this CEO in the past has kind of done some questionable things like rolling back DEI initiatives. He hasn't done that at Starbucks yet. However, Starbucks is kind of being permissible about all that. They're not really going for DEI, but they're not going anything against it right now. They're just kind of being a bystander and letting whatever happen, while companies like Costco are going all for DEI despite it being kind of rolled back at a government level.
I've always seen Starbucks as very DEI forward, personally.
That's kind of how they
Yeah.
want you to see them because and then also they like to they don't have a lot of locations in neighborhoods with a lot of poverty.
True.
It's a lot of white rich neighborhoods or places that are being gentrified. That's where a lot of Starbucks are being popped up and yeah, they're trying to seem they're trying to have a positive picture, but just kind of peel back a few layers and you see it's all performative.
Yeah. I do know there's quite a disparity in the barista population versus the middle management and management layers, right? In terms of demographics, and that's one of the big complaints, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
Which
where
may
the
not be specific
unions.
to Starbucks.
yeah.
Mhm.
All
Yeah,
right.
well, it's where a lot of the union things come in. A lot of the baristas and workers there, they want to unionize, they want to get paid, they want to be treated like humans. And middle management, upper management, kind of kind of trying their best to legally uh toss that under the rug.
Hmm.
And of course, that's one of the major complaints about Amazon that they churn through. Is that by design they churn through employees. They don't expect the actual laborers to be there for more than 18 months because the physical demands of the job are so onerous. And this is a very conscious business decision on their part. And while it may be true that people enter into that job with an understanding of what the model is, it certainly leaves a bad taste in many people's mouths and make us wonder, do we really want to give them our business?
Yeah. I do think it's a good thing that we have this level of transparency and that the younger generations are taking advantage of that to, live a more values forward life. Although you see, my experience has been the same with my own children who are your age, Bronson, that they'll still make decisions that are very personal for them, like Taco Bell, which is a big corporate, because it's convenient and they like the cost and they like the experience that they get when they go to Taco Bell. They know exactly what they're going to get. So it's a little bit of a dichotomy. It's that gray area that is very hard when you're leading a larger company to figure out what do I experiment with and how do I experiment in such a way that I can find something that's going to be useful and loved by my customers, and yet I can still make a profit at it to meet the demands of not just the customers, but also the shareholders and the people that I serve that are on my team, that actually produce the products and the services that we perform.
Yeah, and I think that's a good place to wrap up. But on the sort of the micro level that you just alluded to, Sean, that it's very hard and perhaps impossible for any of us to be 100% consistent.
Yeah.
It's just, life's too complicated. And we do have to make compromises. And I'm just writing an article about this right now, that making compromise or compromising does not mean that we're necessarily compromising our core values. It means we're making a concession to the reality of the world we live in, to the complexity of life. If I would determine that I can't do business with anybody who violates any of my values, there might be where I can go.
Not doing much business, are you?
You
Yeah.
might be off grid.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, if I'm expecting perfection from all my friends and all of my associates, and well, I mean, I can't expect perfection from myself. So
Yeah.
there has to be an element of grace, an element of pragmatism. And I think it goes back to our initial question, really, of trying to find that balance between honoring our core values and acknowledging the practicalities of the world that we live in.
Yeah.
And there's always going to be a tension there. And I think ethics really calls on us to confront that tension and to embrace it to a certain extent, to recognize that's part of the human condition and to struggle to make the best decisions we can, which is why we call it grappling with the gray.
Love that.
So thank you for there's been a different type of discussion than we've typically had in the past. But I appreciate your time and your insights, Sean Flaherty, Sara Kalmeta, and Bronson Taylor. Really is appreciate your efforts to try to get ethical clarity. For those of you who are watching or listening, if you have a topic you'd like us to take up, please go to my website, ethicsninja.com. Use the contact information. Submit your idea. If it's compelling, we'll take it up on a future episode. And if you would like to have access to the conversation that follows the backstage conversation, that is available to premium members. Go to my Substack, and you can investigate how to become a member there. And until next time, as always, we encourage you to continue grappling with the gray.